I'm really excited to be interviewing Liz Carter this afternoon, who a lot of you obviously know. She's a Christian author. She's recently written Treasure in Dark Places, which came out of her experience of shielding during lockdown. And I just really wanted to start, Liz, by asking you to tell us a bit more about yourself. And I should just say, I'm Anita Kelly. I am a mental health awareness trainer with Flourish Wellbeing, and I'm also a Christian writer and blogger who blogs on mental health. But I just wanted to run this session today to hear a bit more about Liz's experiences of lockdown and what she's learned, but also to help us to kind of be thinking as we're now preparing for, well, we're now in a new national lockdown. Some inspiration, some ideas, some encouragement. So yeah, Liz, could you just tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. I'm Liz, obviously. I live in Shropshire with my husband Tim, who's a vicar, and my two kids, one who's at uni and one who's at sixth form. I'm an author, blogger, and poet or wannabe poet, and yeah, just love writing. But I also, as many of you know, live with long-term chronic illness, and that's a lot of really where my writing sort of springs from, originates from. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and what you've kind of shared a little bit there, you've touched on it, like what inspired you to start writing in the first place?
Yeah, I feel like I've been writing forever actually, because when I was really little, I used to love just writing little short stories. So I got really inspired by things like Narnia and Enid Blyton and all of those kind of books, and just used to write, well, probably what you'd call fan fiction nowadays. So I used to write faraway tree fan fiction. So yeah, make up my own little stories about that kind of thing. And then I actually wrote a book when I was 8. Like I had a whole notebook and just wrote a book. So that was my first kind of go at it. And really since then I've just always loved it. But I'd say that there was a gap of many years when I wasn't writing, and it was when I was teaching, and then when I had my kids for quite a long time, I just lost all the confidence in writing. And part of that was from my illness degenerating and feeling like I didn't really have anything to say or couldn't really write. And so I didn't try. And then it was about 10 years ago, I just decided to start a blog. And it sort of, it went from there really. Yeah.
Okay. And what motivated you particularly to write Treasures in Dark Places? Because I know your first book was Catching Contentment, which was a little bit more about kind of your life story and what you found helpful in living with a sort of long-term chronic illness. But what motivated you, this time?
Yeah, well, this time it was very much to do with being in shielding during the pandemic. For the first bit of it, for the first sort of 4 to 5 months I was in shielding. And I felt inspired towards this one because I had been writing another one, which had been going well at the beginning of shielding. And then as shielding really started to take its toll on me, I found that actually it wasn't quite going how I wanted it to go. It just wasn't coming together in many, many different ways. And a friend said to me actually that, why don't you write for joy in this time? Because, you really need something that's going to sustain you. And I found myself starting to write poems, not just for joy, but because they actually got out some of the truth of what was happening. And I was able just to express a little bit of what I was feeling and what was going on. And a couple of people at the time also said, why don't you get your poems and stories together in a little book? Some of the stuff I put on the blog before, and I thought, well, why not? And I started to do that, and it came from there. I found that fresh stuff was coming. It wasn't just old stuff, it was a load of new stuff coming. And it just sort of exploded from there, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's really good to hear, and I guess that's really good to find joy even in a time of darkness, a time when you were having to isolate yourself from the rest of your family as well. Is that right? Because what
Yeah,
did shielding really look like for you?
yeah, it did. I mean, when I first got the letter, it was just, oh my goodness, this seems really extreme, because they were asking you to actually stay in a different room from your family if you could. And obviously, not everybody shielding could do that. Not everyone has the opportunity to do that if they don't live in a house that's big enough to do that. But because I live in a vicarage, we were able to do that. So I was sort of living on my own in my study in my room, um, and not able to touch or hug my kids and my husband. Um, just really going by the rules quite extremely at the time, because I felt that was the right thing to do. Um,
Yeah, it's been tough.
and that was, it was harder than I thought it would be. Nights were really, really hard. I found that, yeah, I found that I was going into some really quite dark times and low times and feeling quite depressed sometimes. Um, and I'm doing it again now. I'm shielding again now. I got another letter the other day,
Wow.
but not
Yeah.
as extremely, thankfully. They sort of said it's more
Okay.
advise you to do this advice. So I'm still going to keep 2 meters away from the family, but still live in the main areas of the house. So it's slightly different, but still a bit tough.
Yeah. So you sounds like you've maybe got a little bit more freedom this
Yeah,
time round,
yeah,
which is
definitely. Yeah, can go outside for exercise, which helps.
oh wow. I think that does make such a big difference, doesn't it? Being able to get some exercise and some fresh air even and just get a change of scene. I think all of those things can be helpful when you're
Yeah,
having to shield or
definitely.
just be in lockdown. So I can totally get where you're going from. And I mean, you talked about what really helped you to get through those low periods.
Um, okay, I think, well, Zoom helped a lot
Okay.
because just being able to actually see people. And I think I don't know how I'd have got through it really without the technology of just being able to connect with people, with my church family, with my friends. I did find myself on Zoom an awful lot in those early days, um,
Yeah.
and it was just such a blessing. And I know it's not the same as meeting with people. It's not at all the same, but it's still something, and it's sustaining. Um,
Yeah.
and then also just the writing helped, but just digging more into God, because I found that it was almost like I came to the end of myself in it, like I didn't have anything left, um, because I was, in some dark places within it. So I really, really had to sort of almost take my own advice from my first book, Catching Contentment, which was
Mm.
really all about how you find peace and rest for your soul when times are tough. And I was having to actually dig more into that and say, well, yeah, this is, I mean, it was real for me then, but in a way it was even more real through that time. I was like, am I going to actually, take account of these words about finding contentment,
Okay.
when it hurts, and that means actively pursuing God and actively seeking God, um, within that. And then that's when we kind of find the riches of His presence. Yeah, when we do actively seek Him, when things, yeah,
Totally.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And I mean, that whole thing of having to press into God, I think that has maybe been something that I mean I can identify a little bit with that through the previous lockdown because I found for myself I went through a period where I just didn't really want to face how I was feeling and I kind of switched off a bit emotionally from how I was feeling to and I thought it was a coping mechanism but I have to be honest that it really didn't help me and if anything it kind of pushed my mood down a bit lower and the only way that I could find to um, to overcome that in a way. It was a couple of things. It was having to acknowledge how I really felt in the situation, and acknowledging that I wasn't feeling that great, and being real about it and actually writing it down and having the courage to face it a little bit, which at the time my head was going, no, 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 you should be feeling okay, you should be managing this better. But what through that time I found a little bit like you, that I had to, it's like God was stripping stuff back from me, and that self-reliance, and I had to learn to be more reliant on him and come to him with exactly how I was feeling, and kind of surrender it to him and find his strength again. And that was a process of a couple of months, when things were, when sort of lockdown was dragging on. So I can completely identify with what you're saying there.
Yeah, I think
Thank
you're
you.
right. I think that we often almost beat ourselves up for perhaps not coping as well as we think we should, or we don't feel that we can share and be honest about actually really cracking under pressure a little bit. But actually sharing like that can really help one another, because showing that kind of stark vulnerability can invite others to be honest about their own pain. And I think that's something that I've written about before. I wrote about in the book before, but it's become even more real to me through this season, that actually the honesty of it, and having people around you that you can say, look, today really sucks and I really need prayer, and to go right down into the depths with them, is really important. And that's what I found so sustaining, I think, in all of this. Yeah, I think just that honesty. And I think that I've always found that the Bible is so wonderful about being honest about pain, because sometimes I think it's almost like people might expect Christians to be perhaps all sorted out and cheery and happy all the time, and no depression, no ill health, any of that. And if there is that, you have to put a bit of a mask on and say, oh, I'm fine. And I think there might have even been a bit of a culture of that in churches, although I think it is getting better, definitely. But I think you look in the Psalms, don't you? And you've got all these people saying, actually shouting out at God and saying, this time is really rubbish, help. But I'm still going to look to you. I'm still going to turn to you. I'm still going to, dig into the riches that I know are in you and that you've promised. And that's when your perspective shifts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, do you have a poem that you'd like to read that kind of maybe sums up how you found lockdown, or kind of what helped you during lockdown at all?
Yeah, I've got a couple of poems. I'm trying to work out which one would work for this. I'd say I'm going to share a poem that's a bit sort of stark about my feelings about being in shielding, just because right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about how the NHS might have to prioritise people in treatment, and they might have to sort of say to the clinically vulnerable, well, no, we can't treat you. And there was a lot of kind of talk on social media about that, but also some newspaper articles and things about how some of the more elderly people had been asked to sign DNRs and things like that because of the issue with it. And so a lot of people in the shielding community were feeling as if they were worth less, because there was also a lot of talk that said things like, oh, this disease only kills people who are going to die anyway soon. And I think when you are in that extremely clinically vulnerable category, you then can feel quite like you don't matter as much. And I know that people are not saying that to make you feel like that. They're saying it because it's a fact, and because it perhaps makes them feel a little bit better. But it can really, I think it can really hurt deep down when you're feeling like, well, I'm one of those. Do I not do I not matter? So I wrote this, it's just a little poem I wrote called Shielded.
Okay.
It goes, so what am I worth in this scourge of the earth? It seems I am cursed as my body is worse than the young and the fit. I'm a number and it. I know I'd be missed, but I'm on the list, condemned in the letter until the earth's better. I'm measured as less in infirmity's mess. But my value's in more than my CFS score, worth beyond age or words on a page, more than a look at lines in a book, a flawed reflection of holy perfection, a new creation of glory's narration, love beyond measure in deep sacred treasure.
Wow, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
I
And
think
I
that's what
mean,
we all are, isn't it? We're all a flawed reflection of holy perfection. And in all our different struggles, we all, you know, we're all still that new creation of glory's narration. So it's just taking hold of those truths of who we are, you know, in God. So yeah,
I think that's really important, isn't it? That remembering our identity in Christ when things around us do look so uncertain or we look so dark. Like God brings hope to a hurting world, and brings hope where maybe other people can't really see that. And I think that's something I'm really trying to hold on to at the moment. This last week, in our group of churches, we had a day of prayer, and we've been sort of praying for revival, for people to come to know Jesus in our area, and I guess across the UK really. And but one of the things that we were kind of talking about, some of the words that were shared, were like around Jesus being the light, Jesus being the light in the darkness, and the darkness hasn't overcome it. And I think that does give us hope when we are in these dark times, definitely.
yeah, I agree. And I think that actually what a lot of us are facing right now is a really different kind of Christmas, and that can actually be quite a scary thing to a lot of people. That what is it going to be like? We might or might not still be in some kind of lockdown or restrictions or tier restrictions, and we've no idea really whether we'll be able to be with family members, or it looks like we probably won't be able to be having church services, or at least not church services as we know them at Christmas. And I think that probably a lot of people are feeling desperately sad about that, I know. And I think I just want to say into that like you said, it's about the light shining in the darkness, as darkness has not overcome it. So it's finding a new perspective, that it isn't just about the building and about the services, though they are lovely and I miss them myself. It's more about getting right into the center of what Christmas is all about. And I've written a few blog posts on this over the years, because there's many years actually that I've missed Christmas, in terms of services and just all the things that make up Christmas, going out and all of that kind of thing, because I tend to get quite poorly around then, so I've often been in hospital or just sick, and it's felt like looking from the outside in as everyone else enjoys the festivities, and that's been something that I've really had to learn to I don't know, just like I say, find a new way of looking at, so that I'm not I don't know, so that I'm not completely plunging into sadness about it. It's not that it doesn't make me sad, it does make me sad. But I think that actually then setting aside time to dig more into God and to spend more time with God and more time in worship and all of those different things. I love that YouTube has so many worship videos. It's just amazing that we can access those. And then I realized that I am part of it. I'm not on the outside looking in, but I'm on the inside of God's story. And that because Jesus came to earth in all of its mess and all of its pain, And so he came to talk to people on the margins. He came to minister to people who, you know, who were those people who perhaps felt on the outside looking in. And so we're not, we're right on the centre in his kind of topsy-turvy kingdom, and that's what I really love. And that is the message of Christmas, isn't it? So
yeah. No, it's interesting you say that, because it makes me think of one of the other poems that you've written, which was for Good Friday on your like Holy Week, I think, and you kind of write it from the perspective of the disciples looking at Jesus on the cross, and you kind of talk about the Jesus sitting with us in our pain and in our suffering, and that really spoke quite powerfully to me recently with something that I was going through. And you also talked about how Jesus like catches our tears, which I think is that a reference to somewhere in the Psalms?
There is a psalm that says, you collect my tears in a bottle. I think it's in the New Living Translation, but it's a really beautiful translation. I love that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I included that in one of the stories, or maybe the poem as well, I can't remember. Yeah, no, in the poem as well. But the stories in the book are very much kind of my reimaginings of different encounters with Jesus and different accounts from scripture, really, that I just tried to bring almost like a fresh point of view to like a different person or an unexpected person, or even like a different timeline, just to try and perhaps draw readers into the story anew. That was my prayer for it, and that's where those ones come from, that looking, you know, being Mary Magdalene looking at the cross, or Mary the mother of Jesus looking at, you know, looking at the grave on Easter Saturday and how she felt, very much digging into their feelings and what it must have been like for them, and then how that can speak to us when, you know, when we're struggling with our feelings in any way.
Yeah, definitely, because it made me think a little bit that I don't know if you've heard of like Ignatian style of prayer, but it's a kind of way is when you're doing Bible study as well, when you imagine yourself in the story as one of the characters. And I know for my husband and I sort of done this at various points, and found it really helpful, but I know for him, he kind of says when he does that, it helps him sometimes to work out how he's feeling himself. And I think being able to have that time and space to be able to stop and just acknowledge how we're feeling at this current time with all that's going on, that's an important thing too. And so it's good that you're kind of mentioning that at this point.
Actually, Ignatian readings is very much sort of almost underpinning something of that, what I wrote. And I found one of the things I found really helpful in lockdown is the Lectio 365 app, which is the Pete Greig 24/7 prayer app, which very much springs from that kind of theology, really, and that, you know, sort of Ignatian readings. And it's just lovely because it's literally 10 minutes a day, and you can either listen to it or read it, and it's just so helpful for taking you right into that Bible reading, and then just praying into it as well. And that's one thing that I found really sustaining actually over lockdown, and a real joy, in fact. So yeah, I'm grateful for it. Yeah,
cool. Thank you for sharing that. Someone suggested that to me earlier in lockdown, actually, and it has been something that I've found helpful at times, because it's just that literally taking a breather from life for those 10 minutes and just being with God in a sort of very intentional way, which is can be really helpful, definitely.
I've actually just written a little book, which is an Advent devotional, which takes kind of a similar idea, in that it's just a short reflection every day and a prayer and a little bit of the poetry from the other book, the Christmas Advent poetry. And it's called, I've got it here, it's called Advent Treasure. So that is now available. You can get that on Amazon, or if you sign up to my mailing list, it's free. So yeah, that's just come out today, actually. So I mean, it's only a little thing, but it might be something that you might find helpful for just your Advent readings with just 1 page a day to perhaps help you with if you're struggling in Advent, maybe. Yeah, so
That's really helpful
throw
to
that one.
know. That's okay, thank you. Yeah, because it's not really that long till Advent now, is it? I mean, it's sort of beginning of December is only a few weeks away.
It is, yeah. Yeah,
So
it's already the second week of November, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and what would you say was the most important thing that you've learned during lockdown?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. um, I think that it is probably a continuation of what I've been learning over years, um, which is very much summed up in the book, Catching Contentment, as well as in Treasures in Dark Places. And I think it is that it really is that the only place my soul is at rest is in God. And however much I look for other things and strive for other things and try to make um, my life full of other things, it's just become more and more evident, and that is where my rest is, and that is where my peace is. But I think also it's in another lesson probably that I've learned in lockdown is that I can actually be kind to myself, that I can actually show a little bit of self-care when things are not going that well or when I'm struggling. And it is okay just to say I'm struggling. It is okay to say I'm going to sit and watch Netflix all day. It is okay to just just be real before God and before others, and just be honest about that. I think it's okay to admit to fragility, and I think that we need to model that for the church as well. So I think that's another. So probably not so much a new lesson as old lessons just firmed up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, that makes me think of something that Patrick Reagan from Kintsugi Hope quite often says in his talks, that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and that, like you say, I think, and that's one of the things he's really tried to highlight recently is about self-compassion and being kind to yourself in all that's going on. So it's good that you're kind of reinforcing that same message.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You should read his book, Honesty Over Silence, because it's very much it's sort of sharing that, and his new book will be as well. So
yeah,
definitely read those. Yeah.
no, that's great.
Mhm.
Thanks very much. Is there? I think I've just got one final question, which is just who or what's helped you during lockdown personally? I think you've already touched on the fact that like your faith in God obviously is really important to you and has really helped you through lockdown. But is there anyone else or anything else that you feel's helped you manage lockdown personally?
Um, I think I've probably covered that in terms of, I think just the connecting with people over, over technology, and the Lectio 365 app, and the just accessing the worship online as well with churches, because that actually has been a big thing to me, because I think for many, many years, I found that when I was housebound with my infections, that I couldn't ever access church, um, and that was a real, it was a real grieving place for me, that I couldn't, feel a part of my church community. I know I was a part of my church
Mm.
community, but not to be with them. But over lockdown, it's been a real beautiful thing for me to see that churches have opened their doors and reached out to those who are on the margins, and those who perhaps couldn't ever make it to buildings, because I often can, but there are those who can't at all. There are those who are housebound all the time, and to be able to draw them into worship together as well has been such a great thing to see. And I know that our church are going to continue doing that even beyond the pandemic, which hopefully will end at some point. And I hope a lot of churches are going to continue with that as well. I think that they are. Yeah, so that's been a huge thing for me, and I've written poems about that in the book as well. So Yeah.
Cool. That'll be good. So, and if people do want to get hold of a copy of your
Mm.
book, where can they go to
Yeah.
do that?
Okay, you can find it on Eden or Amazon and Waterstones. If you want a signed copy, you can message me and I'll send you one. It's just a little bit extra postage and packing, not too much. Um, you can also actually ask your Christian bookshop to order it in. You just need the ISBN, but you can find that off Amazon or Eden or wherever. So yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for that today. And it's been lovely to just hear a bit more about your experiences and how your faith really helped you, and just how your writing obviously has really fed into the creation of this book, Treasure in Dark Places, and your other books as well. So, and thank you so much as well for persevering today with all the technology
Well,
issues we had earlier on. So thank you for working with me to get that one sorted. So
thank
um,
you as well. Thank
yeah,
you. That's great.
it's been lovely to speak to you today, and I wish you well with the next few weeks of lockdown as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
you too, and everybody on the stream. Thanks so much
yeah,
for joining us today. It's lovely to see you all. Um, yeah, it's great. So I'm just gonna end the stream now, but that will be left up on the Facebook page for you to see. So
lovely.
thanks everyone.
Cool. Thanks a lot for joining.